So that's the first thing. Second thing is don't feel guilty. I am giving everybody permission to not feel guilty.
Why do you have the authority to give me
Because I'm going to
permission?
explain why.
All right.
Guilt comes from responsibility. That's where guilt should come from. If I'm responsible for something that has gone wrong or I've done something, I can feel guilty about that because guilt is about me. It's not about the individual, right? So if you're not responsible for that person being on the street, then you shouldn't feel guilty.
Well, those of us who suffer the drive into Denver almost daily get to see the parade of, well, should we call them interesting characters that have made sidewalk life so wonderful, uncomfortable, crime-ridden, feces-ridden, urine-ridden, vomit-ridden, needle-ridden. And I always wondered how it is down in the Springs. Jack Briggs from the Colorado Springs Rescue Mission. How long have you been there?
Almost 2 years now. I was in the U.S. military for about 31 years, retired as a general officer. My last assignment...
A general officer?
Yes.
Is that a term?
Yes.
Or were you a general?
I was a general.
There we go. Okay. I was a general officer, and I was a general colonel.
Yeah. My last assignment was in Colorado Springs. A bit of a Colorado Springs inside-outsider. I was a little kid there. Went to the Air Force Academy. Had my assignments there, and then my last assignment. But when I was there, my last assignment, I was on the board of directors for the Springs Rescue Mission. I have a history of homelessness and addiction in my family. I had a sister who's actually on the streets here in Denver. And she passed away in 1988 on the streets.
Very sorry to hear that.
Yeah, she got sick. She wasn't taking care of herself. She was a drug user, and it was a hard life. And she got sick, got pneumonia, and she died. So I've been around this and been involved. When I retired from the military in 2017, I deferred to my wife, who had been following me around after 20 moves, and said, hey, and she said, I want to go live in New York City and try that. I said, okay. So I got a job in New York City at New York University as a vice president there, but the call to come back to the rescue mission in Colorado Springs came from the board, and we couldn't say no. So got back in October of 2020, and I've been there since then.
All right. I can't help but notice, and tell me if I'm wrong, but when I go down to the Springs, I don't see nearly the transient problem. And I've told you this personally. Around the Independence Institute, where we are right now, there have been so many homeless problems that we don't call them homeless anymore. We call them bums. And I feel terrible for that because it's dehumanizing, it's bad, but at the same time, when the building gets broken into, when we're cleaning up their litter and their vomit and their feces from the doorstep, when we're cleaning up dirty needles and used condoms and all the rest, and shooing them away because we can't have them on our property, it gets really annoying. And after a while you go, why doesn't the police do their job? Why doesn't the mayor do his job? Why don't we get rid of this problem and force them to get the help they need? I go down to the Springs, I don't see nearly as, not that it's invisible and it's not there, but I don't see nearly as much. First of all, talk to me about my use of the term bums and that feeling I have of just, I've had it. I don't even see you people as sympathetic, empathetic creatures that I should be concerned about. I just want you to stop destroying the city I love.
Yeah.
And I feel bad about that, but I am more angry than I am feeling bad.
I think that comes from a variety of different sort of feelings. One of them is you are empathetic. You don't want to see these people in that situation. And that situation then boils itself over into what happens in the neighborhood and how that sort of degrades the neighborhood. Let me tell you, in this situation where people are just on the street, no one is winning. No one. Absolutely no one.
Are you sure about that? Because I'm seeing people who are getting services, who are getting fed, who are getting clothed, who people bring them food. You can talk to Mike Kaufman when he was homeless for a week to explain that he didn't lose any weight on this experiment. You know, so, and I'm seeing people who are either mentally ill or drugged up and ill, or living a vagabond bohemian lifestyle. I'm seeing more and more of those in Denver, and I can't imagine that these people, aren't getting something out of it. They are getting something out of it.
I think they're folded into the larger group of your first two, the folks with mental issues, and then folks with addiction issues, and a lot of them are co-occurring.
Right.
Right? Which comes first? I used a lot of drugs, and now I have mental issues, or I have mental issues, and I use drugs to make the voices stop. Right? And then you have this other element that maybe comes in and takes advantage of the situation that is what I would call toxic empathy towards folks that are on the street, because those folks with addiction and those folks with mental health issues, if those aren't being addressed, there is no progress there.
Let me jump on that term, toxic empathy.
Toxic empathy.
Explain. That's a beautiful term.
Right.
I want to know what you mean by it.
Right. People will feel guilty, and in a way to assuage their own guilt, because guilt is about you. It's not about the other individual. We can talk about why guilt is probably not the right emotion to begin with anyway. And so they will think empathetically or compassionately, what can I do to help? And where this goes off the rail is a misunderstanding about life on the street. Because quite frankly, life on the street is done by transaction. Just like it's done in jail or in prison or with drug dealers or with human traffickers, it's transaction. If I do this, you'll do that. If you do that, I'll do this. This is how things are managed on the street.
I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. You're talking about on the street.
On the street.
Because I hope in my family life, my relationship is not transactional. I hope I feed you kids, and in exchange, you do your homework. But you and I've talked about this, and I found it a fascinating idea that everything on the street is transactional, including begging for money.
Exactly. What it is about is it's about power. So if I'm on the street and I want to engage with someone else, what transaction can we create which balances the power differential between us? And those are the things that actually get accomplished. When you just hand something to somebody on the street, you are not engaging in a transaction. And the transaction can be as simple as asking somebody their name, quite frankly, and you giving yours. That's a transaction. We're sort of getting ourselves on a more equal plane, if you will. When you don't do that, when you just hand something to somebody, you're creating a power differential. You're saying, I've got stuff, you're worthless. By doing transaction, you do two things. One is you help to sort of address the manipulation that can happen when you have an engagement with someone on the street. The second is you might even start to plant the seeds of worth, meaning I have something of worth that you want, and you have something of worth that I want. And if we trade those things, we have traded things of worth. Now, obviously on the street, those are very negative things sometimes. There's drugs, alcohol, body. There's a lot of different things that you could. When you get yourself into a.
I'll sleep with you. You give me cocaine.
Something as crass as that. Yeah. But if you're in a situation like a rescue mission, we can use that as a tool to start to engage with somebody by not just giving them something, but by transacting with them. And that's the magic of a place like the rescue mission. Now, you mentioned what you see in Denver, what you see in...
Yeah, let's take a quick detour to Colorado Springs. Now, Colorado Springs is a big city. It's not quite as big as Denver, but it's growing. Mm-hmm. You've got homeless, but I don't see the same problem. Talk to me real briefly about policy. Is there a policy, legal difference, whether it's enforcement, whether it's camping? What is different that if you go down to Colorado Springs, you're not tripping over homeless people passed out on the sidewalks?
I guess I'd have to start the conversation with some numbers. I'll try not to do too much, and I'll compare Colorado Springs, El Paso County with San Francisco, the city of San Francisco. And the reason I use these two is, while not exactly the same, they're roughly the same size and population. The 800,000, let's draw a line there.
Although San Francisco is in a much tighter area.
Place, but more density. But you see a little more than 800,000. You see a little less in Colorado Springs, El Paso County. And these are HUD numbers. These are not my numbers. There's a thing called the point in time count, and that's HUD, not me.
Right.
And so last night, roughly in San Francisco, approximately 5,000 people will have slept on the streets. That's not in shelters. That's not in hotels or something like that. It's just on the street. Last night in Colorado Springs, that number will be under 300.
That's amazing.
Now let's get to your question about why, right? A variety of different things, but the bottom line is you get more of what you incentivize. That is human nature. I don't care if it's homelessness or if it's batting averages or if it's investments or it's what food you advertise on for your
As
store.
every economist says, whatever you tax, you get less.
Less of.
Whatever you subsidize, you get more of.
Right.
And in Denver, we subsidize the homeless. Are you saying that the homeless are not as well subsidized? That is, there's not as many services and comforts for people who are homeless?
No, I will tell you that one of the success stories of Colorado Springs is the fact that we have a broad community working together. Meaning we have city officials, we have service providers like myself and other service providers who provide different services than I do in the same area.
But so does Denver. Denver's got every imaginable group and facility and homeless advocacy group and social justice group all meeting. And then we have the road home and we put up services and services.
So in Colorado Springs, we have a no-sit-lie ordinance downtown.
You know what?
No-sit-lie. And we have a no-camping ordinance.
Does that mean I can't sit down at a restaurant and tell falsehoods?
No. You can't sit on property and just stay there, being inebriated, high, transacting, drug deals. You can't do that.
It's against the law.
Yes.
So here in Denver, when I see people, the term was loitering, but here it's just they're getting drunk, they're getting high on the sidewalks. And the cops won't do anything about it here. I don't think they have any politicians to back them up. In the Springs, you're saying those activities are against the law. There are ordinances against them.
There are ordinances against them. Now, let me be clear. These ordinances are not the answer. They are a tool. So let me give you an example, right? When the CSPD, Colorado Springs Police Department, has this tool, they don't just wander around and everybody that's on the street they arrest. They don't do that. That's not an efficient use of their time, and they just don't have the resources to do that. But what they have now is a tool which says, you don't look like you're in very good shape. Okay, you can't stay here. Let's take you to the rescue mission, or let's take you to the hospital. Right? You can't stay here.
They have the legal authority to use their judgment.
Exactly.
So if it's a couple of kids having a hamburger and they're sitting on the sidewalk, they're not going to be there forever. It's a guy and he's obviously inebriated and he's homeless. The cop can say, what you're doing is illegal, so I'm going to take you in. And then he can get some help.
Well, they probably will just bring him straight to the rescue mission.
Really?
As an example, yeah.
They don't bring him to the police station.
They don't need to.
Right.
That's not the objective, right? The objective is to not let this person suffer out there by themselves on the street. The other thing that it allows as a tool is to maybe target predators. If they recognize somebody as a predator, a dealer, a human trafficker, somebody that's doing nefarious things to other people, they can use this tool then to say, that's illegal, you can't do this. You can't be here. The other flip side to that is if they find somebody vulnerable, somebody who's having mental health issues or maybe a behavioral health issue, behavioral health being drugs or something like that, or some young girl that they don't recognize. She just showed up. Who is this? Oh, you can't stay here. You can't just sit here.
Now,
let's take you to some place
let me kick
that
that
might
back
be better.
and see if I'm following you. Mm-hmm. I think about that girl, and I've seen these girls, and you go, oh my God, you're going to get preyed upon. You're going to be trafficked. You're going to be drugged. This is awful. But if a cop has no authority to bring you someplace for your own safety, what can they do? You're telling me that in Colorado Springs, it being different,
It can be a tool.
it can be a tool. It's say, young lady, I'm sorry, even though you don't want us to, we're taking you in. And by the way, once you're in, what's going to happen to you? And then what?
There are services that may be provided.
Right.
And again, it may not be us, right? We are very focused at the rescue mission on what we call low barrier. These are folks that are, there's pretty much no place for them to go. They're addicted, they have law enforcement issues in their past, they can't find a place to rent, they can't find a place to stay, they have addiction issues, and we're the place that they would come if they have no other place to go. But there are, as I was saying, because Colorado Springs has this broad constituency of groups that will work together, a young girl may show up at the rescue mission and we'll find out what her story is, and then we may call one of the other 50 plus organizations that we work with and say, hey, this is somebody who probably could use your services, and then we'll get them transported to that place.
If the police didn't have that tool, they didn't have the authority to say, there's a camping ban, you're camping, we're taking you in.
Exactly.
Then the beginning of this journey for them can't even start.
Yeah, it's not quite as simple as you can't stay here, we're going to take you in, right? For camping. So camping, you have to make a notification. There's a whole process that you have to go through. Typically, it will drive them to move, if you will. We have good examples. I could even show you a video of one of our guys who went through our entire program, but the catalyst for him to come to the rescue mission was they did a, quote, sweep of the camps and said, hey, you guys got to wrap up all your stuff and get rid of your trash, and we're going to pick up all the hazardous waste and everything else. You got to be out of here in 48 hours. And so this guy who had been moved along a couple of times goes, you know what, I think I'm going to go to the rescue mission. 18 months later, he now works for us. He's sober. He is just one of the greatest examples you can possibly imagine of somebody who has moved away from that was a phase in his life, and a long phase. He was an addict. He was just selling dope. He was just to being on the street, to coming to the rescue mission and realizing he matters. He matters not because he sells dope. He doesn't matter because he can hurt somebody else for somebody. He matters because he matters.
All right. I'm going to keep pushing you on this. Help Denver. You are able to come out here, and by the way, you get the power of a monarch for an entire day to reset any and all Denver policies. What do you change so that Denverites have a cleaner, safer city?
I would say that having the tool of a no-sit-lie ordinance would be a very useful tool. I do have to be honest with you, though. Denver and Colorado Springs have a different dynamic that is important. Both of us sit on I-25, but Denver also sits on I-70. And so the intersection of these two big interstates means that it's a destination, right?
It's a destination for homeless.
Well, for anybody, but yes, it's a pathway across, east or west, north or south. And so Denver has a slightly different problem than Colorado Springs does. And I don't want to be Pollyannish about this and say with a magic wand you could just do this, because those factors count, they matter, and it complicates the problem a little bit.
So with your magic wand, you close down I-70.
I wouldn't do that. That would be a supply chain issue that would create a lot of different issues.
Run them through Cheyenne, they'll be fine.
But I would say that having the tools available, I think it's important that there be places for people to go. The only way you can have an effective no-sit-lie ordinance legally is somebody has to be able to go somewhere. Now, there's varieties of math on how you do this. Out in California, a federal judge said you had to have, if you had a population count of 1,000, I'm just making a round number, then you have to have 600 beds. You have to have 60%. And the reason is there's a sort of an idea that of the 1,000, 200 would probably go home.
This is not satisfying. Let me try this again, Jack. You have a magic frickin' wand. you see what's going on in the streets of Denver. What would you do with that magic wand to make the Denver problem a whole lot better?
I just said it.
So you would, the sit, the don't sit, no lie.
I wouldn't.
Urban camping ban?
Absolutely. You know, those are both, they sort of go together, right?
What about the subsidy part of this? When John Hickenlooper said 14 years ago that we're going to end homelessness permanently in 10 years, and so he put $50 million a year plus into services for the homeless, and our problem got about 50 times worse. What a frickin' shocker to me.
And that's pretty consistent across the country.
Really?
When you look at any of the, people will come to me and say, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? So let's take a look at some of the places that have done some of these things. California is an example, the numbers, Schellenberger and his San Francisco, and even the campaign that he ran when he was running for governor was not about housing first, which is
a constant cry.
Sort of the law of the land right now with this administration, which really does not.
Let me jump ahead for people who might not be following. You're talking about Michael Schellenberger, who's a reporter. I think his name is Michael, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he wrote a book called San Francisco. And what was interesting is this was a pretty liberal journalist. Oh, yeah. What a surprise. And he started looking at the numbers and started coming to some different conclusions. Housing first was this idea in the homeless world of the first thing we do before we do anything else is to make sure these people have a home, a shelter, a roof, bed, toilet, shower, food. What's wrong with that idea?
Sounds great.
Sounds great.
If you want to solve people not being on the street. So let me tell you that there's two problems to solve here, right? The first is you've got somebody on the street, and then you've got the problems that got them on the street. So if you just give someone a place to stay, rent-free, with a voucher, you are kind of solving one problem. Right. Which is getting them off the street. Unfortunately, there's not enough money to build enough of those fast enough. They're very expensive, depending on the property value, how you build them. I mean, in California, they're up to $800,000 a door to build one of these. Oh yeah, it's
the price of 2 homes in Denver to build.
It's crazy. It's crazy, and you can't build them fast enough, right? But
and besides, if you do build them fast enough, don't you just end up building the projects that failed experiment in the 60s and 70s that we saw?
Well, I would say it's even more near term is the fact that because of the policies of Housing First, you're not really requiring them to address the issues of why. So there's no wraparound services required. So Schellenberger and in his book and in discussing, he really talks about shelter first. So shelter, let's build enough sheltering that you can get people off the street and get them maybe connected with their first services. Because if you can get people healthier, you can start to work on things like their ability for vocational training. And then from vocational training, you can get them maybe work.
Or I would imagine if you can get them into the system, you can get them the mental health they need.
Yeah, be exposed to that. Again, I'll go very back to the phrase that I said at the very beginning. When somebody is just sitting out on the street, nobody is winning. That person is not winning. They're not getting any better. They're not improving their situation.
And the thing that
the businesses aren't, the city is not. No one is getting like an upward vector on any of this.
On life, but there's one person in that whole world that's getting something for nothing. And I disagree with that. You've got a homeless person who's getting handout and services and vomiting in front of businesses, and his bad decisions are affecting everyone else's life. What was an eye-opener for me was when you talk about it as a transaction, that when I give him $1, here I am, I alleviate my guilt. Here's $1, or here's a bottle of water, or here's whatever it is. And yeah, I feel better about myself because, look, I care. I care. A lot of virtue signaling going on there. What you opened my eyes to was the idea that the guy takes it, he accepts, you're better than I am. I've I've taken your buck, I've taken your bottle of water, I've taken your Kit Kat bar. Thanks, man. God bless. Yeah. And really what it is I did not earn this. I have no respect. This was not a voluntary transaction. I didn't do something for you. I don't know if he was homeless or not. I was in a traffic jam, and I was in Stapleton, and there was this guy doing juggling in the middle of the intersection and doing hysterical things, and he was working. And giving him a buck was like, you put on a show. I will give you $1 for the show I just saw. And I didn't have a problem with that.
Yeah. It can be good, but it can also be manipulative. So this goes to the number one question that I get when someone when they go, hey, so what do you do? I work at a homeless shelter. Oh, really? What do you do there? Oh, I run a homeless shelter. Hey, Jack.
Hey, Jack.
So I got my sign, right?
I want to see the sign.
Yeah,
it's a good sign.
Right?
I've seen the sign.
Yeah, the sign is, the question is.
By the way, the problem is that cardboard is way too clean.
It
was obviously not done by a homeless guy. You did that.
Yeah. But the question that I get is, hey, Jack, when I pull up to the light and I see somebody with this sign, what do I do? And I know exactly why people ask. Exactly. Because they feel guilty. And so I have
guilty of what? Before you answer
but
that.
let me get there.
Okay.
So 2 things. The first is, honestly, it really doesn't matter what you do at that point. You're not going to change that individual's life at all. There's nobody on the street corner with $495 in their pocket that needs $5 so that they can make their rent. That is not what is going on, right?
I'm just $5 from getting that ticket so I can go back home and be with my aunt.
That's just not a thing, right? So if you decide that you're going to give them something, it goes to this power differential that they'll particularly, well, I don't give them money, I give them food. Okay.
At least they can't turn that into drugs.
Well, but they can trade it.
Oh.
Transaction. Remember I talked about transactions?
Now they have something of value.
Right. Some young girl that's hungry, you get some food from somebody on the street corner. Now you can have a transaction with her. Right? So that's the first thing. So whatever you're going to do at that moment, and the other half of it is you ignore them. You don't roll down your window. You don't look. You don't do any of that. They're not going to write down your license plate number and go to the DMV and find your name and figure out what
bang on your door.
You're a bad person.
Give me that $1.
Yeah, right. They're not doing that either. It's a numbers game. They're just going to flip it, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is don't feel guilty. I am giving everybody permission to not feel guilty.
Why do you have the authority to give me
Because I'm going to explain why.
All right.
Guilt comes from responsibility. That's where guilt should come from. If I'm responsible for something that has gone wrong or I've done something, I can feel guilty about that because guilt is about me. It's not about the individual, right? So if you're not responsible for that person being on the street, then you shouldn't feel guilty.
I've always thought that guilt is not living up to your own standards.
I would say that it has more to do with empathy. You can be empathetic and you can be compassionate.
And this idea that I'm not living up to my own standards to being a charitable, caring person, worrying about my fellow man.
It's still about you.
I have some responsibility to help those in need. Feed the hungry.
That is still about you.
Yep.
All of it is still about you. None of it is about the individual who needs the help. And as long as you keep focused on you, you're not going to focus on what they need because, again, housing first. Housing first is sort of like a hammer for every nail of homeless people out there. When in reality, there's a variety of different people. There's veterans, single moms, addicts,
truly mentally ill,
people who are new to the United States that can't figure out where to go and what to do. Right? There's a whole plethora and variety. And what you need to have, housing first is okay. I'm going to say if you have a co-occurring disorder with an addiction and you have some sort of disability, there's going to be a very few things that you can do for yourself. So maybe housing first is the right, and the most vulnerable should maybe be qualified for that. But that should not be the only answer to everything, right? And that's the rapid rehousing, which should be used more. Before you go homeless, let's see if we can't keep you in the place that you're in, as an example. But this whole idea of
So you've alleviated our guilt now. So
that's
now
that's the second thing.
Jack says, hey, don't feel guilty. You don't have to give them a buck. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to do any of this. It's okay. Go with God.
Yeah.
You're guilt-free now. Thank you for that, by the way. And that's important to hear because people do feel really guilty.
But you could do what I do.
What do you do?
So
He asked, rolling into that question.
Yeah. Well, if I get to the light and there's somebody there, I roll down the window. Now, old people
roll up
down
the window.
I rolled.
You roll.
I roll down the window.
Dad,
right?
what does this mean?
Yeah,
It means
yeah.
roll down your window. Why does that mean roll down your window, Dad? Yeah.
And I say this: what's your name? Because you see, no one ever asks a homeless person what their name is. And when they come back with cowboy or sugar or baby or caveman, say no. My name's
Not your
Jack.
stage name.
Yeah.
Not your stripper name. What's your name?
My name's Jack. What's yours? You are doing what? You are creating a transaction.
What's that transaction?
The transaction are names because real names on the street are a commodity.
Explain that. Why would real names be a commodity?
Because street names are a protection. So you don't know who I really am. But if I know that your name is John, because if someone comes up, let's say law enforcement, hey, we're looking for John, right? Oh, John who? Well, he's sort of kind of,
Right.
he's got a beard. He's,
Yeah.
they're narrowing down, right? They can find out who you are. Whereas if your name is caveman or cowboy, it's going to be harder to figure out who's who, right? So this idea of a transaction right there, say, John, I'm really glad I got a chance to meet you today. The light's going to change. You could drive off. You've done a great deal there. You've acknowledged the person exists. You've gone past just the like, hey, dude. You've said you got a name. You got like you're a person. This is the big deal, right? Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to reacquaint people who have been in this situation for a long time to the fact that they matter, that they have value, they have worth. Because it's been taken away from them, quite frankly, it's stripped away by a variety of different things. It can be the mental health issues, drugs, legal issues, a lot of those.
You do this a lot, and you roll down your window. Hey, my name's Jack. What's your name? You're in the business. You're in the industry. All right? You know the lingo. You know what you're doing. I can imagine little old ladies watching this going, I am not rolling down my window.
Don't. It's okay.
It's okay.
It's totally okay.
All right. If I get the name, my name's Caveman. You go, your name's not Caveman. My name's John. What's your name? You go, oh, it's Robert.
Yeah.
And how you doing today? Oh, it's okay. Yeah. And then we drive. All right. I feel a little bit better, but what does that do for Robert, a.k.a. Caveman?
He'll actually think about it because somebody has done something other than either ignore him or just, give him a buck, right? And the other thing is, if you want to engage a little bit more, like this particular sign says, hungry, okay?
Yeah.
No matter what is on the sign, I don't care what is on their sign. Here, the Denver Rescue Mission, Colorado Springs, the Springs Rescue Mission. No matter what's on their sign, the rescue missions can help them with it. It doesn't matter. I'm a vet. I got a dog. I'm hungry. I need to work. I'm tired. I've got an addiction. Whatever.
Well, it says, "Why lie? I want a beer."
We're not going to give them one of those, right? But you can say to them, instead of a beer, they can give you dinner. How about that?
All right, so I don't know if you ever met Bob Gauthier, the late, great Bob Gauthier. I'm sure you've heard of him. He did Step 13, now Step Denver. Yeah. He took no government money. That way he could be a very hard-loved place. And he was, how should we put it, not a sensitive, 2020s kind of guy. No, he was the guy who called it, and he used to give out these booklets because people felt bad. And so he put out these booklets with coupons for a free meal at Step 13. Put out tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, gave them to everybody. And in the 10 years he did it, he got two of them back. Because they didn't want a meal. They didn't want the help. They didn't want to get sober. They wanted their lifestyle.
Exactly. And what I'm telling you is that for you, the individual, if you want to make an impact, unless you get out of your car and start working with that individual, And this is one of the fallacies about toxic empathy. If you just leave people on the street, now what you're going to do is, if you want to provide services to them, you have to go individually, like this big, long, snaky line of people. Like the first person goes, hey, are you a veteran? No? Okay, then, okay, next. Do you have mental health issues? We need to get you evaluated next. Yep. Okay, that's one person. Now you've got to go to the next person and the next person and the next person, right? That are just because you're allowing them to live there, right? As opposed to creating places, like I said, where there's space for them to go. And quite frankly, if you ever came to the rescue mission in Colorado Springs, we have an open courtyard. We have a single point of entry, so it's safe. But you get into the courtyard, you can sit and lie all day. We're not going to hassle you. We're not going to make you do anything.
Can I do drugs?
No, you cannot do drugs. No, you can't get drunk. You can't do drugs, but you can do your laundry. You can take a shower. You go get food. You can use a regular bathroom. And then when you're done, you can go back out on the streets if you want to. But we have people that stay there all day because it's safe, because they have access to resources. They can talk to somebody about getting their ID again. They can maybe talk to somebody in child services about how they can, what do they have to do to get their kids back. They can talk to somebody about the voices in their head. This is, in my opinion, much more empathetic and compassionate than just allowing someone to exist on the street. Now, again, you're playing into a little bit of the narrative that there's a lot of bohemian, just sort of folks that are out there, right? And there are, but there's a lot of folks that need help. And they don't know where to go. They don't know what to do.
We need to start wrapping this up. But let me ask you this: what is wrong with move along? In other words, there are cities who will pay for a bus ticket one way. Leave. Be somebody else's problem. The people that I see around Denver, yeah, there was a time I was like, we need to help you. We need to, connect. We need to do these things. I just want them to get the hell out. I want them to move along. By hook, by crook, I want them gone. Yes, that's terrible, and it's bad, and it's awful, but this isn't the Springs. And we're dealing with crime. You can't keep your catalytic converter here, of course, because Jared Polis outlawed catalytic converters. We have to buy the California ones now, and they're 3 times expensive. That's why it's happening. But that's a topic for another time. We're tired of it. We're tired of every car trying to be stolen for drug money. We're tired of finding people in our bushes. We're tired of it. What's wrong with let's make it uncomfortable to stay here? And who knows, maybe you'll end up in Colorado Springs, and that would be fine by me.
Well, I think they're going to find that the culture of Colorado Springs is not that you're just going to sit there. You're not just going to lie there. There are so many opportunities for you to get better. We're going to push, we're going to incentivize you to go to those.
Yeah, but that's part
youth,
of that's part
LGBTQ,
of move. Isn't that part of
everything.
Move along? You can't stay here. Move along. Move along.
You can't stay here. You can come, and here are the resources that are available to you.
Denver's full of resources. Agreed?
How they work together takes leadership, and I will just leave it at that.
Well, no, you're not leaving it at that. What do you mean it takes leadership? Are you suggesting that Denver doesn't have the leadership to make all those services work together, along with move along?
I think you have to make the decision that you're going to use all the tools in the toolbox, and not just we're going to pay for housing first and we're going to pay for warehousing, because that's what I think in the most crass sense, housing first is warehousing. It's just warehousing. It's just warehousing people. You're not really going to move them. And I can say this because we have at the Springs Rescue Mission, we have a permanent supportive housing unit of 65 doors. We have it. I run it. And I can see the difference between that model and what we do in our transitional housing model that we use. And they're just, the raw numbers just show one is more successful than the other. And quite frankly, it's cheaper. It's, I don't know if it's faster. Individuals, everybody that's on the street is an individual, and that's an important note. But moving along, I get it. My drive, though, is to help them. Not in the sense that you don't want to help them, but I believe you can do both.
Do you have people sleeping out on your doorstep at where you live?
Of course not.
My suggestion is when you do, and I know lots of people who are chasing them out of their buildings. Mm-hmm. I've gone in hallways and stairwells, and there they are. The move along attitude I find wholly defensible out of frustration. Let me throw this last one at you. Hickenlooper, when he was mayor, said something, and then he had to shut the hell up afterwards. He said, I think he was governor at the time. He said, we've got this brand new prison that we're not using. Mm-hmm. Maybe we could turn that into housing. And the homeless advocates went apoplectic. How dare you think about putting them in a prison? It's and I thought about it for a second. It's well, if there was a move along and there was a place where you could have a room to yourself, replace the bars with walls and doors, have your doctors and your dentists and the food and the health care and the mental care and the facilities already there, yes, then move along. We'll get you the bus ride there. Whenever you want to leave, you can leave, but as long as you stay, here are all the services for you. Why wouldn't that work?
I think that's what the governor's objective is with the I think it's $200 million that was approved in the last budget, and that's Ridgeview and a second facility. And we've been talking to the governor's office.
The prison was way out there. It's not a place where it's a lot of fun to hang out, not a big nightlife, but if that's where you can get security, food, and a place to hang out, why not?
Well, I think, again, I would say that the move that the governor made this last year to try to use some money to build these facilities, it goes to my point about you have to have a place for someone to go before you can really tell them they got to leave, right? So once you tell them, or once you build a place, or you have enough space for them to go to, now these things start to work together. Because now you can say, you can't stay here, you can go there. And you can start to funnel services, and you can use a campus atmosphere for service providers. So that's what we do in Colorado Springs. We got this out of San Antonio.
Does a campus need to be in town?
I think the easier the access is for folks, the better. But because you're going to have to build some sort of transportation system, right, because people aren't going to walk for 10 miles. They're just not going to do that. But
I'll gladly give them a bus to the place. I want them gone. Pardon me that I feel so.
I hear you. People are fed up. I hear. You got to understand. I hear from this scale which says everybody's a victim and no one should be held responsible for any action they've ever had in their whole life, to I don't care what their problem is, get them out of here, and everything in between. And again, that's the spectrum of people's response.
I tell you, I started on this side of the spectrum, and having to deal with this now
Absolutely.
for 10, 15 years, I'm on the other side.
And that's why I think our nation,
I think a lot of people are, and they just don't want to admit it.
I think a lot of places in the nation today are starting to address this in a way that is going to be more holistic and more to the point of, because if you look at the cities and the leadership that has adopted just a single approach of housing first, or that right, people can just do whatever they want. I can rattle the cities off: Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Denver in some cases. But the thing is, here in Denver, you've got a rescue mission that it's got its game. It needs other help around it and leadership to say, we're going to expand or plug into or add to or create other services that go around it. Because during COVID, the city went straight to Denver Rescue Mission and said, help us, because they needed help. And the rescue mission was able to respond.
Let me add one other aspect. Enforce the damn law. That if you're on someone's private property, you're trespassing, arrest you. You're stealing something from a car, arrest you and punish you and go to jail. If you're breaking into somebody's house or place of work, get arrested. That is a wonderful way to get them into the system and get them there. This city no longer does that. And talking to the cops, they're like, why even bother? In 3 hours, they're on the street again. Why?
They're going to be back out.
Which means they don't get the help, and it
goes.
And these poor cops in Denver, you look, I've talked to them, you see it in their eyes. It is demoralizing to them that they can't do their job, and there's no reason to do their job.
It's about what you incentivize. And as we said at the top of the show, that taking the things, the outcomes that you want to achieve, and then building the programming that creates outputs that achieves those outcomes. And everybody gets enamored with the amount of money that's spent, right? So that's a resource. If you look at a logic model, the resources coming in create programs that have outputs that you can measure as outcomes. That's a logic model, right? You know, it doesn't matter what the issue is.
Right.
So what objectives, what outcomes are you hoping to achieve? For us, we're attempting to achieve outcomes like you are healthy enough that you can mentally, physically make your own health care appointment, show up to it, listen to the doctor, take your meds. That's an outcome. You get a job when you leave the rescue mission, and you still have that job 6 years or 6 months to a year after. You get housing. You know, we will help. Again, we're a different size, but we'll help roughly 40 people a month get a job outside of the rescue mission. We'll help roughly 20 people a month move back into community. Now, they may have been with us for 2 years, but we're helping them with their health, their vocational training, and we're helping them with housing to figure out where that goes.
People want to get more information. They want to learn about the Colorado Springs Rescue Mission. Where do they go?
SpringsRescueMission.org.
SpringsRescueMission.org.
Right, and if Denver is DenverRescueMission.org.
If there was one book or program or video that you think people ought to, read this book, and you'll get a much better sense of the reality.
Yeah, so just recently, and it's on YouTube, and it was done by Schellenberger, and it was actually done by Stanford and the Hoover Institute. It's a discussion with him,
Michael Schellenberger,
yeah, and a California state elected official who happens to be Republican, but the two of them go back and forth about how California has tried to address this homelessness issue, and it really nails the misperceptions, and then what do you do to try to improve the situation. And just to cut to the line here is, instead of starting with housing first, you start with shelter first. To get the shelter first, right, you've got a mechanism here that says you can't stay here. You got to move. Let's get you there where the resources are at. And you know what's a success rate? A success rate in the 20%. That's pretty good.
Bob Cote's success rate was in the mid to high 30s.
Yeah,
and that was his tough.
Unbelievable.
Right, it really said a lot. So basically, Hoover Institution, YouTube, Schellenberger, which means after 45 minutes of this, you should have been watching that instead. Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Absolutely. No, it's my pleasure, and I appreciate what the Institute does to be able to have these conversations. We're all in this. This is a community effort, and I don't consider this to be a red, blue, purple issue. I consider this to be a community issue, and whether it's my community in Colorado Springs or it's here in Denver, if we put our pitchforks down, which we do in Colorado Springs a lot, and we say, here's the deal. All of these different organizations that can address this, we all don't have to agree like this, like we're building a bridge from one side of the river to the other, right? We don't have to start on the same side of the river and agree on everything as we go. We can start on opposite sides of the river and build to a middle point where the only thing we actually agree on is this thing right here, but we're gonna work the heck out of it. I'm not gonna ask you to change who you are, and you're not gonna ask me to change who I am. And if we start to do those sorts of things, we will find that there's a lot of ability to go, hey, I'm not the solution for you on this, but I'm going to call so-and-so and say, hey, we've got somebody here who needs your specific peer-to-peer help.
You still need the tools.
You do.
And that means no sit, no lie, and also no urban camping.
And enforcement.
And enforcement. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.